The enterprises are running under a lot of discussions and pressure on how they should change.
The higher degree of context, the less different models that you can apply that value into.
We are reading articles daily on how AI is going to save the world, AI is going to destroy the world.
Optionality is the opposing force to technical debt.
By 2026, the world is going to spend $3.5 trillion in just transformations. And still, nobody knows what's the right path to go about it. So finally, guys, thank you so much for making time for the change story. And I'm really excited for this particular episode because what you both have been doing with Unbundling the Enterprise, which is your book, is a refreshing concept, breath of fresh air. How you are talking about, happy accidents and how the organization discover the gold mines with that. I'm excited to talk about all of it. So thank you so much for joining in.
It's awesome. Honor to be here, and I'm really glad you enjoyed it, Drew.
No, it's good. And again, thanks for having us. I think it's when you outline kind of the theme of the podcast being around digital transformation, that was kind of where we had started generally around the book. So, my career started right around the dawn of the web. And so I got to experience, my last year of university. I remember sitting in my professor's office and him, just being so excited like a kid over this new World Wide Web thing. And look, you can see what their favorite movies are and stuff. But so as I started my career, it was kind of unfolding into the web as a business medium and the transformational impact that had. So it's kind of funny because, in that 30-year span, we're still transforming. Like it's 2024, going into 2025, and companies are still wondering how they can transform to meet, the potential of the web. So that was kind of the theme we started with the book, where we wanted to explore digital transformation. Both Stephen and I, in our careers, as you'll hear from Stephen in a second, sort of the arc of his career was all about helping companies in that digital transformation. We had a sort of starting point around our own hunch around what we'd seen in terms of APIs playing a big role as enablers in that space. But we really wanted to sort of step back and interview companies, look for the success stories, and we looked at like the big headlines success stories. We talk about Amazon and Google and Facebook and so on in the book, but we also wanted to look at some unexpected success stories, especially for companies who weren't born on the web, but who had to go through that transformation themselves. So, we kind of started out with very much a digital transformation story, talking about paralleling the period from when the web was born through today with the period back in the Industrial Revolution when things transitioned from steam power to electrical power, and comparing like automotive companies like the startups of today and so on. But we ended up very shifting to this whole idea of happy accidents based on letting the story tell itself through the interviews that we did. But yeah, I don't know, Stephen, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think both the book and the process of writing the book and my personal journey have a common thread of a series of happy accidents. In the writing of the book, just like Matt said, we did not intend to write it that way. That was not like the through line of the whole the original idea or even the first draft of the manuscript. That came out of the interviews. That when we spoke to 20 different technology leaders, CIOs, VPs, et cetera, around the globe, every single one said the exact same thing. We decomposed these things, and then these awesome things happened, and we weren't expecting them. They just kind of found us. Yeah. One of the clear stories in the book is the very specific example of how organizations that needed mapping technology, they called Google. And Google didn't call them. They called Google and said, "Hey, you don't really have a product, but we found it underneath the web experience, and can we please pay for that? And like that's true in the process of like what the book is about, how our process in finding that book, and myself from a personal journey, I fell into software. Software found me. I didn't find it.
Wow.
Um, just from coming out of engineering school at Georgia Tech, I went through masters in management, and um, I paid my way through school doing like development work. And when I was younger, like I don't know, for whatever reason, I didn't see that as a career option, that because I grew up in the 80s, and like I know that was present, but it wasn't like dominant and visible and everybody dreams of becoming this, tech whatever. Like that wasn't something I focused on. It kind of found me. And similarly, I also got lucky in not just the finding the domain that really fit for what the stuff I like to do, but also like the people around me. I like, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and
Yeah.
I had the deep luxury of working with some really smart people, some great leaders and mentors, and it was definitely impactful for me, not just from like a technology point of view, but from leadership and design. I worked in a lot of top shelf design companies for a long time, and I used the opportunity to absorb and learn everything I could, and a lot of that stuff is fused into the book.
Wow. Actually, the last part stuck very well with me because at Middleware, our first core value is standing on the shoulder of giants. Uh, so, great introduction. But by the way, you both don't look like you have like 30 years of experience. I mean, you do have the experience, but you look very young. So, uh, talking about happy accidents. Why don't you give a little bit of glimpse on how did you get to the tech field? I mean, Stephen briefly mentioned it, but Matt, what about you? I mean, how did you stumble across tech and why tech? Because what's your story?
Yeah, I love. I was biting my tongue there because I was going to jump in when Stephen was talking about his experience getting it. Here's a few steps, summarized steps for me. I always loved math when I was a kid. I was also child of the 80s, so totally with Stephen, like tech was something that was very much in the pop culture, but from a business standpoint, wasn't as predominant as it is today. We had a home computer. Ours was a Texas TI 99, Texas Instruments 99 4A, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so I used to hack away at that. I remember at holiday time, like hacking together some Christmas Carol videos or something I was programming in BASIC or extended BASIC. Uh, that was fun. But when I went to university, I was really debating between English and math. I loved English, loved literature, loved writing. Hey, here we are. But
Yeah.
uh, but but I found math came easily, so I didn't have to do as much homework. So I thought, I'm going to university. I want to have a big social life. I don't want to do homework all the time. So I went with math. And then I remember talking to professors about, what are the career options in math? And they weren't talking about technology. They were talking as like you could be a math professor or an actuarial. That was kind of it. Uh, and then, but when I talked to the computer science department, because I ended up minoring in computer science, they were like, "It's all about math. It's all about math." So, uh, coming into the field, I got into tech actually just because my dad had worked in the industry, we had family in the industry, and I kind of fell into it as well. But the math background has been extremely helpful because so much of what we're doing in technology is about complex systems and abstractions. And, I probably, as everyone started out thinking math was about the study of numbers, but it's really about the study of patterns and complexity. And so that whole abstract math background has served well as I've been an architect and then whatever we call this, digital strategist, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. And I was, about to, my next question was going to be, how did you end up writing a book? And you answered it already because your love for literature, uh, you know, found you, just like Stephen says, right? Everything finds you. He's a big destiny guy. So, so why don't you both talk about, how did you both decide, or where, like, how did you both meet? How did you decide that, okay, now we'll write a book together
Well,
and
I'll go
acquire
first on
this
that one.
topic? Yeah.
So I I didn't find my desire and my passion for the humanities and that type of stuff until much later in life. It was in my probably I guess my late 30s where I just honestly I got tired of not having the impact I wanted to have in large organizations, and like I knew I needed to change. And like in that process of really focusing on what do I need to do about myself, about my method, about how I engage other teams, all these things I wanted to have more impact. And so and I already had a background in user research and UX type stuff. So I more so applied, like that was the gateway drug for me of understanding human behavior, psychology, from from how technology interfaces with humans and the converse, to actually applying that type of science to organizational development, to interactions with people, and that over time became a real love for the humanities, because it's necessary if you want to really achieve stuff inside of large organizations.
Yeah.
And just through that process, like I just got more and more aligned with my own creative passion inside. And then just before I joined Cox Automotive, um, prior to that, I was in a boutique design agency doing all sorts of creative stuff. And I was about to join Cox Automotive just in a very strictly tech role. And I was looking for a creative outlet, and I just started I chose writing as something to work on and get better at. And people ask me how long it took to write the book, and it took 3 years worth of research and writing and editing and all that other stuff, and it took 10 years to get good enough to write it. 10 years of practice of I wrote weekly feature articles for online magazines and other things like that, and white papers, and I hit both sides of that complex long form writing and some short and medium form writing as well. And then Matt, and I'll let Matt describe how we met. But
Yeah,
at some
we
point,
met through writing. We met through writing. It was, I think I found one of Steven's blogs talking about APIs, and I just reached out like, "Hey, I read your blog. I like that." We just connected that way and sort of kept corresponding through there, and
and
then ended up working together.
yeah, when I think on like day three, when Matt joined the company that I was at that time, like I was like, hey Matt, we can make something together. We can do this. And uh, after a decent amount of collaboration, we created the conversation together with the folks at IT Revolution,
Yeah.
and it took off from there.
Wow. 10 years of research, 3 decades of experience. That's all it took to become an overnight success. Uh, that is very good, because when you're talking about, growing your impact, and, you have to do something to give back to the society. I think uh, I read a book by Paul Jarvis. It's called Company of One. And at that time, I just thought that this is a book only for people who want to remain an IC and, run a boutique business. So it talks about what is growth. So growth is just your ownership and impact going on a increasing direction, and that's growth for you. So now, if you are in a large organization, you can proxied by roles, but once you have reached a good enough stage in your career, you're already in the leadership. How do you grow your impact and ownership? So I think that's a great example of now bundling up your learnings and giving it back to the society. I think, and that's what we are doing as well, as an enterprise, trying to bring the change story. uh, you know uh, just to give more context around the company that you work for and what are you both doing there. Why don't you talk about Boomi a bit, and how are your day-to-days spread across at Boomi?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Boomi's been around for a while, right? Boomi's kind of the company that created what is known as the integration platform as a service category, IPaaS, which really came to prominence at the time when certainly APIs were exploding, but where the second phase, the second era of web-based business was happening with cloud-based services, SaaS applications, the mobile explosion, all that. I mean, the opportunity as opposed to the web just being a place where people would host websites to the connective tissue for digital business. And so, in that setting, companies needed to connect all their data sources and SaaS apps and core ERP and so on. So integration had been always been an important aspect of software engineering, but the more capabilities that you could just pull off the shelf or connect to via the web, the more integration became a competitive strength for companies. And that's what Boomi provides, solutions in that space. And we've been doing that for ever since and in new contexts. Right now, Boomi, we're helping our customers still connect things, helping them expose things via APIs in this whole mad dash to the world of AI, right? The reality is, if you want to get value, business value out of Gen AI technologies, you need to ground the Gen AI with your own data sources. You need to connect into all the places in your business where you actually take action and automate business processes, user experiences. It's all about integration again in the Gen AI space. You need to connect to the LLM services and vector databases and so on. So, the companies that are going to master uh, AI for business are those that have mastered the orchestration and integration of all those assets. So we play a very important role there. I'm fortunate enough to be CTO and both working directly with customers as well as with our product teams and innovation teams, where we're really, I'd say primarily I'm trying to stay a little bit ahead of the industry to anticipate what's coming next, which we expect a lot of agentic based systems, which again, more APIs and integration. So it's a lot of fun right now.
So I am partnered with Matt. I'm field CTO. So I still like, I think if Matt is 80-20, 80% focused on product and leadership and setting the strategic direction of the company from a technology point of view, and 20% working with clients. I'm the flip. So 80% of my time is focused on helping clients adopt the platform, get the benefits of optionality, made real inside their organizations, helping them develop those strategies and execute upon them. I think Matt and I work together a lot because we both see the same and we're not afraid to push back on each other.
Yeah.
And we have a great ear for listening
Yeah.
to each other around just the different perspectives that we have. And like I think we're still going up in the terms of the value that we're able to deliver. Like, we both came from integration, iPaaS, API type spaces. And some of the ways I've been talking about lately is that, iPaaS have a very clear value proposition that works. I mean, there's a reason why Boomi has 20,000 customers. You can't get that sort of scale without being able to deliver value.
Yeah.
And then with some of the more recent acquisitions, you layer like the API capabilities on top of that iPaaS capability and bring them all into a universality type frame, and you begin to get not just a hint, but a real degree of asymmetric value that can come out from like investing $1 and getting $100 out, and finding those 10x moments. It becomes
Yeah.
more plausible. And then you layer AI on the top of that, and you get much more in-depth ability and grounded ability. Like I know a lot of companies haven't received the value yet, but everybody can kind of smell the value.
Yeah.
But asymmetric opportunity is maximalized in terms of propensity with those three layers of capability brought into a singular platform.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I guess, the right people, right company, right time. Uh, so now, as you're dealing with integrations all the time, and the concept of integration, I won't say it originated from that, but at a lot of places with this microservice movement, people are bringing in more contextualized services, interacting with isolated parts, and one part trying to make the sense of a whole, right? And the same way you're collecting data from contextualized isolated tooling, and then one part trying to make idea of the whole. So in this whole era, the reason I was gladly surprised was when you both were talking about decontextualizing system design. Why don't we talk about that a bit more, and maybe you can share an example.
Matt, you want to go first?
Oh, I was waiting for you to go first.
All right, I'll start. So let's go back to that Google example. And before I do that, I do want to drop a nugget that came out of our research work. And this came from Carlos Baldwin, professor emeritus at Harvard. She says a number of different things in the value of optionality, but one of the later things that she says, and this is, I think, further down in the book, is that controlling the interface to value beats controlling the generation of value. And what that really means is, having that position between those who generate value and those who consume value is the optimal market making, matchmaking capability that you can have from just a monetization and a value and delivering value. There's so much business value that comes in owning that space, and the only way to do that really well at scale is through the Gene Kim term is slowification, of only applying context when you need to apply context, and that bundling that context in and tight coupling context in lowers the options in which your capabilities can be used. It's a very simple relationship between
Right.
the higher degree of context, the less different models that you can apply that value into. There's single purpose things and multi-purpose things. And single purpose things have value, like a Kindle is a great reading device. It's possibly one of the best e-reading devices out there. It's not the same as an iPad. It's a different thing. The iPad is much more decontextualized in all the different things it can do, but it will never reach that value of being super great as an e-reader. But because it has more decontextualized as a form factor in what it does, it can do 50 different things. And the same is true with these digital capabilities that don't have a materialized form, and that is the basis for the happy accident to happen. That's the lower degree of context, the more smart people who don't work for you will find that thing and make it suit their purposes and derive value out of it. And that's what opens the door for your happy accident by being the interface to that value capability.
Right.
That's the book is littered with examples over and over and over again of how not just the digital giants, whether it was Coca-Cola or Best Buy or Cox Automotive, by creating those decontextualized services, opportunities just emerged, and we were poised and ready to do it. And this is the other half of the story that makes it very clear as to why it works. Is not only do the decontextualized things allow other people to find them, the effort required to integrate to them or make them available is so low. Like that's the formula for the happy accident. A decontextualized thing that is fairly close to the surface that enables somebody with a really small amount of effort to make some other use case that you didn't plan for happen. And like, that's not like the example of Google, like, and these happy accidents, that's not an isolated incident. That's a feature of the internet, right? Like we talk about it in the book. Slack was a video game company, and Stuart Butterfield saw the chat capability that his team had built for game players and said, "No, that's the product. Let's go." And that wasn't like either, that wasn't new to Butterfield either, because he did the same thing like however many years ago when he brought Flickr to market. Flickr was also a video game company. And this became like the theme of the book because every single leader told us this. Like, we were doing X, thing Y found us, big opportunity opened up, and big value just fell into our laps.
Absolutely.
I think
all these
that-
nerds start with the video game companies and then move out. I don't understand, either the industry is wrong or the complexity of tech is so high that they discover a product on the way. But I have one.
if I can, sorry, Drew.
Yeah,
I can add. I just want to add something about the happy accidents theme, because we deliberately went with the science of happy accidents as almost a seemingly contradictory statement, right? We did that intentionally because a lot of the cases that we're citing, they were literally just happy accidents. Like, they didn't know what they were getting into. Like Google, I would say it's not that they weren't naive. Like Brett Taylor's blog on Google Maps, for example, when they opened the API up, he was like, "Hey, we've kind of run into this situation where developers want to use this API, so we're going to open it up and see what happens." But we're really trying to aim at, if you're really aiming for happy accidents, how do you make that happen? And that's where I think we've had this idea of decontextualized services for a long time in tech, and we've had, whether it's this, I think the sort of the first wave of SOA 20 years ago was very much really intentional about, we're going to build a service and it's going to be the one and only service and everybody's going to have to use the service. I think when it comes down to building decontextualized services from the start is a good thing to do, but it's a tricky thing to do, because there's the obvious risk is, if you build a service for one use case, then you overly contextualize it, then you're eliminating the optionality of the solution. But you can go the other way as well, where you over-engineer, trying to think too deeply about what all the potential edge cases are that you might ever need to support, and that means you have optionality, but you've spent too much money. You've over-invested on that stuff. So I think that's really where the techniques we're putting in the book, it's not just about decontextualizing and generating optionality. It's about really aiming for the happy accidents through our whole OOPS methods around, yes, you want optionality, but you want to also sniff out the environment to see what the right potential places where you're going to have value could be through value dynamics and opportunism, and then the whole optimization feedback loops where you can constantly monitor to see when something is actually happening that could take hold. So
100%. Yeah, decontextualization and decomposition by default is one leg of the three-legged stool. It doesn't mean decompose everything, no matter what you do, into the smallest possible microchunk. It doesn't mean that. It's decompose by default is a shift in the conversational structure around, rather than finance, and program leadership compressing everything and saying, the best way to conserve our capital and resources is for you to throw away all that propeller head nonsense and just move as fast as you can to the release. And if you're only familiar with doing it in this monolith way, then do that, because that's the cheaper, therefore better way. And like, through the research, we found out, number one, the math is wrong. It doesn't really work that way. What you're actually doing is killing your financial future, because, like Baldwin says, optionality has high value when consumer tastes are heterogeneous and unpredictable. And we can unpack that if you want. But the converse is also true. Rigidity is dangerous, existentially dangerous, when consumer tastes are heterogeneous and unpredictable. And you just look at the last 20 years of various different disruptor events and how many companies just died because the balloon payment had come due. That shortcut by default leads to massive amounts of debt and a balloon payment that when the future arrives, you will not be able to afford that, that payoff.
Yeah.
But so one of the ways that Matt and I have been talking about it recently is optionality is the opposing force to technical debt through institutionalizing that idea of decompose by default. And it doesn't mean make everything a microservice no matter what. It means that, hey, if you're going to, skip this step in building it, you have to be the one to justify. Why should we skip that step? What's the value in doing that? Are you sure you want to crush all that optional value that's out there? Because future prediction, frankly, is for chumps.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is just like, I like the idea you said, conversational disrupts the conversation, Stephen, because people just aren't measuring the option value. I like in a simple example from earlier in my career, I started my career at a bank in technology, and as I mentioned, like this was the dawn of the web. People were trying to do everything online. There was a whole project spun up to do online account open. Like, how easy can we make it to have somebody online go in and open a new account? And I remember this, all the work going into it, design sessions and everything, and advocating for, well, hey, I was kind of in an SOA mindset. Well, what if we made these reusable services? And it was like, no, that's too expensive. We need to get this thing out as quickly as possible. And everything was hardwired all the way through. I remember it was like some third party consultancy. They built like this own blob of an monolithic application off to the side of the whole bank. And then went out, people got some traction a little bit on online account open. And the powers that be said, this is great, but can we do this for the branch too? Because our branch account open process is manual and broken. And it was like, yeah, well, let's start over again and we can build it for the branch. If it had been done with, in an unbundled, decontextualized way, it would have been simply add another channel and away you go.
Yeah, one of my favorite ways to say this, and I forget who told it to me, so it's not mine, is there's never enough time and money to do it right, but there's always enough time and money to do it twice.
Yeah. That's definitely a Mike Amundsen thing. I don't think it's his either, but I've heard him say that quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because now someone from the engineering team would listen to you and say that, hey, you stopped me from making my product have 10 other features, and then the debate goes between over engineering and making it for the future, right? So there's I among like many other principles, the principle that always sticks to me from the clean architecture is the open close principle, right? Open for extension and close for modification. And when you're designing the product or any software, I think it's really important, and I'm sure you have written that in your book, on where to apply these concepts. Because sometimes if you try to over engineer a consumer facing app and you try to do n things, then it might defeat the purpose. But if you contextualize your platform service, if you want to send out notification, and then you say that, hey, 10 years back, the only way to send notification is via email and SMS, and then boom, WhatsApp comes in, and then you have to write another service, which is a WhatsApp notification service. So that's the wrong idea, and then you should unbundle the notification service in general. But if you start doing it on a certain feature that your product has, I think it's a thin line, and it's always interesting because that differentiates the good engineers from the poor engineers, where the good engineers are always, as you mentioned, right, are always applying the context when needed and leaving every possibility open for extension, right? And that yes. philosophy just carries on, from the olden days to now, and along the way, everyone just picks the surface context. For example, the way you said it. I mean, you have to you have to put optionality as an opportunity, and then people start putting optionality in what was supposed to be a simple thing, instead of thinking it through and unbundling it and understanding what's the platform approach on that.
Yeah. One of my favorite nuances that we outline in the book on this is, investing in optionality, which has all that great oppositional force to technical, that stuff in there.
Yeah.
For some people, it lands in them like, you're talking about gambling because you can't predict the future. And like, no, no, like we're talking about doing it at scale in a, medium to large organization. And you take this context, like, do casinos gamble? No, casinos do not gamble. They can't predict what each and every hand is going to
Yeah.
be, but they know that if they set the table right and work the math, it is almost, if not exclusively, impossible for them to lose. It's less about, designing your solution to maximize the receivable value of if you're right, and it's more about minimizing the possibility that you'll miss the winning option,
Yeah.
because that winning option will have an asymmetric return, and your ability to find that winning option through small bets placed wide across a large organization, also with targeting that towards the ecosystem that you're working in with an ecosystem
Yeah.
map that's spelled out in the second layer of the OOPS methodology, and having the ability to learn fast and adapt fast through not only feedback loops, but this brings you right back to the decomposition technique, because decomposition actually, it functions on a curve. The more decomposed your capabilities are, the easier it is to rebundle and repackage them in a
Yeah.
different manner, and that's the last half of the feedback loop.
Yeah. And the house always wins. That's the reason.
The house always wins.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So Matt, coming down to you, you had a, long run in the banking industry, and in the financial space. Have you encountered some of the systems which were running, and we all know how banking has changed over the years, right? uh, do you recall any examples uh, of the systems which were running greatly and people were proud about it, and then all of a sudden, as the internet came in, things started to shake down, and those systems blocked the business progress?
Yeah, for sure. I think banking is an interesting industry to look at, though, because especially the Canadian banking industry is pretty like just unmovable when it comes to financial success. I mean, I remember every year we'd do the project reviews and weigh them, and I would get all excited about the technology, but there might be an initiative to raise the ATM fees by 5 cents, which would make the bank another $1 billion or whatever. It's like, okay, that one's approved. So they're pretty resilient financially, at least here in Canada. But um, you know, going back to Stephen's point that he raised, that you brought up from Carlos Baldwin's book, Design Rules, there about the value, owning the interface to value is more important than owning the source of value, right? We had a massive customer information consolidation migration initiative that went on. And one of the reasons I think it was able to succeed, where there was lots of tombstones littered along the way of previous attempts to move the customer stuff, was we put the focus away from. I mean, there was still a lot of focus on where to put the data, but to put the focus more on the interfaces to the data and the integration to the customer information than on the source itself, and like built the migration path around that. And so recognizing that abstracting the interface to the backend sort of system was the key, actually led to it actually being able to be completed, because we're able to take, because there's all sorts of hooks and tentacles from the entire bank, all divisions, investment banking, retail banking, and so on, into this customer information store. abstracting that, providing an API-based interface into that, and then was the only way to actually move it, and actually insulating it first and then migrating it. So that's not so much an economic story, but even an architectural story of the value of you know, normalizing and decontextualizing the access to those services, migrating that first, then migrating the actual systems.
Got it. Interesting. And this topic, I think, especially for the companies about to or undergoing digital transformation, is very important, because now they have to, I mean, they are taking this huge step which is going to span multiple years, and they are redesigning the systems. But hey, I mean, these were the guys who were living with the old system, and there's a high possibility that, because the large organization tries to sustain what's working, and there's a large possibility that their context is caged for them. So now, how, I have two questions and two ways I want to explore. One is, how do they ensure that they don't end up in a deeply contextualized system again, right? What steps should they take so that they don't have to do this? Or, I mean, people further in the organization a few years later don't have to do this. As you know, you mentioned that you started your career back then when people were amazed by internet, and then also people were going digital transformation, and 30 years later as well we are doing digital transformation. So while technology is, changing at a very fast pace, but in the near future, how can they avoid uh, such transformations, or enough time to do it twice, and make the system contextualized from the get-go?
All right, I'll take the first half of this, Matt. You guys, you can come on the end. So when we talk about decompose by default and using standardized interfaces as a tool, and when we say API, we're not being exclusive to REST. Like, yes, all REST things are APIs, but not all APIs are REST. And
Yeah.
that finding like the last part of the book talks about specifically this question, and like there's a big section on the risk of losing discipline, throughout. And there's a couple of factors here that go in. So one, midway through the book, there's a story from Steve Stone, former CIO of Lowe's and former CIO of L Brands, and he was very direct with us about a key thing, is that you, like, the way that I phrase this is you can't really skip steps. It doesn't work that way. And the way Steve talked about it was, if he didn't, so I'm going to paraphrase a good amount, that if you jump right up and say, we're going to decompose everything, and that's going to be our first piece of strategy, kind of like you said a minute ago, Drew, that's a multi-year endeavor. And finding the way to derive financial return from that multi-year endeavor is depending a bit too much on luck.
Yeah.
And the way that Steve talked about it is got to be in the beginning of your initiative to find like explicit, discrete, linear financial return. And he talked about it from the cloud versus on-prem statement, that he was able to orient his leadership team on the idea that we're going to invest in optionality at the infrastructure level. He may not have used the optionality term, but we're going to invest here, and I'm going to return cash to you within this number of months. And part of that cash I return to you is going to be reinvested in how we keep going. And I'm going to build your confidence in me and my team's capabilities, and we're going to start the flywheel. And then moving one level up from the infrastructure stack, because when he was doing this is like large scale API ecosystems were not exactly a real thing at that point. There were some, but they were in pockets. And this was the beginning of the IIS wave and the cloud wave and the move to there. And he was able to take that, turn that into the next wave of work that may have had a little bit more lead time, but then the action started finding them, and they were able to turn that into awesomeness.
Yeah.
And it wasn't only Steve who focused on that way. whether it was through research, through like Mick Kirsten's work and uh,
Project to
product,
product.
great work, or a bunch of detailed information. This is something that didn't make it to the book. It's in a white paper we're working on now in the public sector. Bobby Saxon from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid did the exact same thing in a government context, which is nearly unheard of in
Yeah.
being able to actually like he cut a deal with his finance leader and said, "Hey, the way that we do things isn't really working to uplift the whole agency, and we're never going to get out of the hole we're digging if we don't find a way to change. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to invest in these basic capabilities on at an infrastructure level and at a decomposed system level. And when I deliver upon that and I save you this amount of cash, like then guess what? Part of that cash is going to be completely reinvested in our ability to do it again, in our ability to do it again, over and over and over again. And creating the flywheel starts with quick returns that people can understand and see. And one of the other ways I describe this in my own work with clients is maturity follows revenue, not the other way around. And that you can try because like I'm a nerd, I live by the same things that developers and whatever live by and architects live by, and we believe that why would we ever release something to the world that isn't fully hardened and doesn't have all the things necessary to operate it? Because finance won't let you. That's why. That trying to invest in maturity without a financial return is a 3-year effort that nobody has the stamina for.
Yeah.
Nobody.
I
And being able to actually, find the financial return in a way that builds the flywheel in a shorter time span, that's the key to being able to create this optional universe, because what you can accomplish in an organization is a function of how much others trust you to
Yeah.
be able to deliver.
Yeah.
one of the themes that we probably don't stress enough because maybe it seems too obvious, but it's completely implicit that we're hitting on here. Or maybe it's a theme or a prereq, but like one of the first things that this book is really about is that technology is a business, and that this whole paradigm of the business is here and the IT team is here is
Yeah.
over. Like the internet ended that, and it's just part of digital transformation is coming to the conclusion. I think that's a general theme for all the IT revolution books, which is why I think they're all so vital. We've mentioned a few of them here, and we just mentioned project to product, and you've got accelerate and DevOps handbook and everything like, and of course Gene's books. They're like the mindset shift starts there. It starts with recognizing that if you're in technology, you're in business. And so something is like we have stories that again, it's always sort of this obvious first step. Asat Césaire from Coca-Cola, that was the sort of the origin story there. He went in as the CIO of Coke. The
Yeah.
first thing he did wasn't go in and drive all the optionality and introduce new tech innovation. It was shore up the business to show a positive impact
Yeah.
from the IT team financially in order to get a seat at the business table with all the business leaders, become a recognized business leader within Coke who's running technology, and then from there apply these new principles around decontextualization and unbundling and so on. So I think that's just a really important step that we're very conscious of not being a pedantic or over engineered, maybe too philosophical on
Yeah.
the principles here. It really is an optimization exercise of saying, look, we know this works, but it has to work within the realities of business, right? And I think and usually if you're measuring by placing cheap bets, driving high option value, placing cheap bets, finding the right intuition, like those over engineering efforts will fail on one of those things. It might not fail on optionality, but it would fail on placing cheap bets, right? So
Absolutely. And I think that thing is so true that the notion of IT and business is changing, because the older enterprises who like some of them that you named, and they were always outsourcing IT, and for them
Mm.
it was a commodity. So it was a job to be done, uh, and it wasn't a function of how they thought a few things. It was just a gig, and then slowly they needed so many gigs that the cost started going up, and then they thought that making that team in house would be cheaper for them. Now,
Mm.
when they are moving as a tech first product, they have to think about product, how things
Yeah.
will extend further, and hence we do need a table, a seat for that engineering leader on the business table, because
Yeah.
how else will you be able to impact or drive more business value? Because if you let you know a brick and mortar mentality build the technology business of today, you will ideally make contextualized businesses. But this
Yeah.
bits and bytes kind of thought process will likely be creating more platformish approach, and the way you talk about creating more optionality, and which will bring in more happy accidents. So love it, love every bit of it. Now,
Just
yeah,
on that note about the commoditization of IT, like again, we can't pretend that like all technology is so vital to the core of the business. This
you're
is where I think the value dynamics work in the chapter 4, I believe, in the, oops method number 2 is really important, because what value dynamics is intending to do is actually show you how to visually draw out your business model through the collection of value exchanges you have in your organization. And that will tell you, it gives you a measuring stick of how close the capabilities you're building are to driving your business. So there are functions, like, with all due respect, like, HR systems or back office systems that are not as close to revenue generating, that maybe they are commodities, and that's probably why a lot of companies are just moving those to SaaS applications and so
yeah,
on. But I think that so even the notion of like one technology leader who's across the entire technology stack is probably a little bit outdated too. And we've seen different ways that you can have CTOs or CIOs working in new organizational models. But I think again, we always try and come at it with this optimization mentality of there's no black and white solution for things. We have to always be measuring them against pragmatic measuring sticks to learn what's the right thing to do.
yeah,
Can I add one thing here?
for sure.
Um, uh, so deeper down in the book, I think it's in chapter 6, if I remember correctly, like the success strategies, exchange optimization. There's like an in-depth conversation with David Rice, who's SVP at Cox Automotive, and one of the like the deep truths that David helped us out with, and we had to go back to him like 3 times before we really got it, and we were able to pull it out of him about what he was really saying, because there's a number of times where he would talk about how platform teams have problems inside of a lot of like non tech businesses. And, there's all this stuff out there, whether it's team topologies and wherever people are talking about, the beauty of the economic beauty of platforms. And David really got us. He was like, if you try to do that before the business teams can like, you know, read the same book that you're talking about in terms of until they see the business as a platform, trying to turn like big investments in platform teams is unsustainable, because
Yeah,
disruption will hit your business, and who's going to be the first to go
yeah,
in a universe where people see IT as the cost center. Until you're able to transcend that notion
yeah,
and get business leaders to really fully understand the platform as the business, trying to force that not only doesn't work, but even if it worked for a period of time, unsustainable,
yeah.
because disruption will happen, the compression will happen, and all that all that knowledge capital is gone,
Uh,
and your ability to actually turn it into, sustained massive business value just evaporates.
You're absolutely right. And in fact, when we are, working with a lot of enterprises from, from the point of view of middleware as well, that's what we are helping them out with. How to make your sense of value stream of what is important to the business. Are we even focusing on that from our engineering muscle? B, are we effective and iterative enough that we are able to convert the ideas into product very soon? And C, time over time, we have delivered a couple of these projects which have resulted in a certain business uptick, right? Proving that what part of business are you working on, top line, bottom line, efficiency of the business is very important, and that's where we also help a lot of enterprises. And definitely, I agree that if you remain a cost center, then you will be the first one to go when people are cutting costs. So tying yourself with the story, with that business story, is so important today, so that you are not the cost center, you're the value center. uh, and I think the way you said it, right, you have
Yeah.
to control the interface to value.
Sorry, you have to get your business teams to say that. It's not that you say it.
Yeah.
If your business teams don't say it, it ain't true.
And that's only possible with data today. You can't prove it otherwise. You can't speak louder than them, and you can't scream with all your engineers lined up. So data solves for all that bias, and that's why we are pretty excited about it. So Matt briefly touched upon a small fact, about the organization design. So I have a question, that if we are saying that the world is, more prone to contextualization, does it also root because the organization is structured in that way? Does it also root because you make contextualized business units whose goal is to deliver a product, a roadmap by the end of the quarter? And how do you, what are your thoughts about that organization structure? B, uh, I mean, would you also change that when you're talking about decontextualizing the system design?
Well, yeah, this is one where there's plenty more books that can be written just on the organizational dynamics. I
Yeah.
think uh, I went and I think I own a domain out there today called orgitecture.com. So I have plans for getting into that a lot more deeply. You're right. Like there's no way around organizational dynamics affecting things. And, I think we mentioned Team Topologies, which is a great book, sort of reimagining organizational structure from the traditional siloed approaches that are out there. So it's definitely linked. And I would say that there are different ways of solving for that. The Amazon is the extreme case, right? Where the whole Bezos API mandate that we talk about, people think of that as a technology or an architectural mandate to say we're going to build everything via APIs now. It's just as much an organizational mandate where basically he's saying teams are going to be structured so that they only build services that are exposed via APIs and are only going to talk through, basically put a wall up so they can only talk through the APIs. So if you want to use, if you need another team's help, you're not going to go and ask the people, you're going to go and just use the services they provide through their APIs. But that's, like in many sort of Amazon folklore cases, very extreme. But I do think, I think the first shift is the whole rethinking the whole business and IT divide. That should help with some of the areas where the organizations, like in what you're describing, stress. It still happens though. Like you still, there's always this contention between teams wanting to get stuff done and wanting to minimize dependencies, and they have their habits, how they do things. So, I think it's probably another book to talk more deeply on that.
Yeah.
And now I would say, like, just the simplest thing to say is beware of the organizational resistance that you may find in that regard. But that also, when you think about decontextualizing, you should be thinking about how your organization can support it. And can you have the right level of sharing? Stephen already touched on the insights from David Rice around, he had some organizational insights to say, keep the teams close to the revenue generation, assert the value proposition. But whenever people are involved, it's just messier. And this is one of those areas.
Right? Because it's not like always about what is the most efficient way to operate your IT teams.
Yeah.
That's not the question.
Yeah. The
That's the
business.
question IT people want to ask,
Yeah.
but it's not the organizational question. And enabling the business to capture value faster, like on their own terms, until they're ready to to move from fourth gear into fifth gear.
Yeah.
When they're ready, that's the time to start having a commons platform conversation. But trying to force that before it
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. And as you said, right, maturity follows revenue, not the other way around. I just
Mm-hmm.
love. I just loved the whole conversation that we have been having for the last few minutes, because everything is talking about is leaning towards having optionality, extensibility, and still tied very tightly with their value, with the revenue, and which makes your organization ready for future changes, right? So you don't have to suffer through a transformation ever again, hopefully. So now, my last question, and either of you can answer. When we are going into the agentic part of the world, and we spoke earlier in this conversation that agentic integrations are going to be even bigger moving forward. When you're making an agent, by definition it is contextualized. So now when someone is designing a system with a lot of agents, or maybe they are adding a chatbot, they're adding you know an internal context aware LLM model, which takes certain actions. How do they take the right decisions where they're not making a generic agent while also keeping the system decontextualized?
This is good because I'm just like living in this agentic future right now, trying to sort all this stuff out. I think the principles we talked about, like minimizing the or isolating the contextualization, is really important. I think that um, so right now we're at a point where we are reading articles daily on how AI is going to save the world, AI is going to destroy the world, we're going to solve artificial general intelligence. We have to watch out for this and that. Like the spectrum of predictions and excitement is just unbounded.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you go into a typical company today and say, how are you getting value out of AI? They'll either say, nah, not really happening yet, or well, we're worried. We don't want to, we have a policy we can't use any AI, or well, we're using it to help, write some email summaries or things like that. Like it's pretty minimal usage today. So I think that my take would be like, let's build from the ground up. We can already do that. Like even if you're looking at how agents are, how are agents adding value today? For the most part, I think it's really through they're a new type of automation mechanism that we have. And where they are today, all the co-pilots and assistants and things, those are kind of running on their own, heavily contextualized on purpose. But I think as we get into the next wave of agents, will be around really helping with more dynamic automation. So much of the automation that's out there today is very rigid, and Stephen talked about the dangers of rigidity. So, I think they'll allow us to get a little more dynamic with how we automate things, but we can build that on top of decontextualized capabilities. Like a lot of automation today is from this system, something happens here, do this, this, and this, right? Now it can be the agent can know that these systems exist and that I can do certain things with these systems, but then the agent can decide what to do and how to execute them. So there's this whole sort of framework of agents using tools to take actions. So I think that, just as a starting point, we
Yeah.
can, again, Stephen's point about let's add value right out of the gates. Let's go and focus on agents that are built on decontextualized tools that can provide value-added services at the start. I think from that foundation, we can start to build up with now, instead of just calling a tool to do something, you could call another agent that's really good at something that is that is slightly more contextualized than the tool, but not as contextualized as the overall agent. So I think if
Yeah.
we build this layers of abstraction but build it on a foundation of decontextualized tools, I think we'll be in good shape.
So the way that I frame that stuff is, I do believe that we're going to see a world of both general purpose decontextualized agents that are capable of doing many things, but not, a specific thing extremely well, and special purpose, highly contextualized agents that are capable of doing, one to two things extremely well at a very low level of depth. And what this brings up, the need for orchestration amongst the agents, that agents calling agents to be able to do complex tasks, because you need both, because humans are on the other side of it, and that the humans vacillate back and forth
Yeah.
between general and specific. And general gen pop operates in the generalization world. Hey agent, do this thing for me, like plan my 3-month trip to Europe for
Yeah.
me. Well, the general one may be able to paint a picture, but it probably won't be that great
Yeah.
at finding all the right perfect lodging spaces and transportation and venues and tickets and all that stuff. But a special purpose agent, can do that type stuff. Orchestration is the key to unlock the interaction between those two things, to be able to really meet the expectations of the frankly spoiled human on the other side who's asking
Yeah.
that question.
Yeah. Of course, it's a kind of a concierge approach where you ask the concierge about n other things, and the concierge says, "Oh, let me redirect your call to the specific thing. Maybe room service, housekeeping, front desk, whatever it is." And those stations have a particular contextualized role to do. Uh, but yeah, fantastic. This has been an amazing conversation. And I'm really excited about the two next books that are going to come from you, which are, of course, unannounced, but only imagined. One is going to be the architecture, and the other one is going to be, you both dealing with the AI side of the world and telling us the final news, whether it is going to destroy the world or save the world, or just fly. just
Well, I
just
don't know.
get.
I think it's either going to be either we're going to empower a bunch of superheroes like Jarvis with Iron Man,
Yeah.
or we're going to create the little lounge chairs with the screens in Wall-E with
Yeah.
all the people floating in space. I'm putting my money on Wall-E, unfortunately, but hopefully.
I'm putting my money on Wally too.
Yeah. So awesome. I think why don't you both give we'll mention the social links for you both, but if someone wants to work with you, what are the right kind of people who would who you'd like to work with you, and how they can reach out to you? We'll start with Stephen
Well,
this
we love
time.
stories. We love. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
All
jumped.
right.
Go ahead if you were saying.
All right. So I like people with passion, people with a digital ambition,
Yeah.
who want to create awesome value. I'm very much a student of craft, and I like when you try and do something, try to do it well, and that's just something I'm committed to. So uh, LinkedIn is probably one of the best ways to reach out to me. Um, I work across industries around the globe with a lot of different organizations to help them, build and execute upon their digital strategies and establish what that digital ambition is, and communicate it and syndicate it throughout their enterprise. Um, I love the work. If people are really interested in getting after it, I'd love to work with you.
Lovely.
Yeah, same for me. And LinkedIn is definitely the best way to connect with me personally. Also, Boomi is a global company, so BOOMI.com. Check Boomi out if you don't know Boomi already. We are, helping with all the things that we're describing here today. So,
Well,
Number
thanks.
one rated iPass in the world.
yeah, definitely has to be. Well, thank you so much. It was a lovely conversation. Thank you for giving us your afternoon. And yeah, hopefully it is very valuable to the companies going under digital transformation.
Awesome.
Thank you, Drew. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. Hope your listeners buy the book, enjoy it, make it useful, write a review on Amazon.
Yeah,
We'd love to hear from you.
definitely. We'll put the link somewhere on there. But yeah, thank you.